Okay, just hold off.
Says
Okay.
live.
Okay, we're on, I guess, and good evening, everyone. All of my fellow councillors, all councillors are present tonight, and their name will be on the screen whenever they're speaking. We also have our CAO, Rob Philpott, and a number of directors. We've got our police chief, Dave Poirier. We have our director of finance, Kristen Dunsford, and we have Aaron, our technical services engineer. We have Greg Goody, our electrical engineer, and we have JP DeRosier, our director for community services. And as well, we have Brian Harlick running the controls. And we'd like to say good evening and welcome to all our viewers on YouTube. And I understand the Journal Pioneer may be listening in. So welcome to all. And we have a number of items on the committee meeting agenda. So I believe at this point, the first one on the agenda is the police report. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Barb Ramsey for Police, Fire and Emergency Services report. The floor is yours, Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Mayor Basil. First, before I do the recommendation that we have on the agenda for this evening, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of myself, Mayor, and City Council to congratulate our Deputy Chief of Police, Sinclair Walker, for his 40 years of service with the Summerside Police Department.
Today.
Today is his 40th anniversary. So on behalf of the residents of Summerside, thank you for your dedication and commitment to us. And congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey, for that. And I remember that day, as mentioned earlier, I was in the police station working when he came in that day, and he has served us well over the 40 years and still serving well. And we certainly congratulate him on his 40th anniversary as of today.
Sure do.
And there will be a presentation made whenever we can get together after this COVID thing gets leveled out, and because that's quite an accomplishment. Our police chief was on camera with us there today, and he had his 40th year, I believe, last year. So we got a lot of experience and seniority in our police department. But, so back to you, Councillor Ramsey.
Those boys from the police academy?
Yes.
It was an academy then.
Yes, there was when I was there.
Charlottetown.
That's 100 pounds ago.
It wasn't at Slemon Park, no.
Oh.
Okay, so I have a recommendation that I'm going to read. And so excuse me, I'll be reading this and not looking at the camera, but recommendation May 5th, 2020, police services, unsightly property. Recommendation is that the City of Summerside CAO allow an inspector to enter upon the property situated at 405 Chestnut Avenue, PID number 307371 in the City of Summerside, and have the property brought into compliance with the requirements of the City of Summerside's Dangerous, Hazardous, and Unsightly Premises Bylaw, CS-11. Supporting explanation is complaints were received at Summerside Police Services in the past several months from neighbors and council members concerning the property at 405 Chestnut Avenue still being unsightly. The police service has been unsuccessful in having the garbage litter cleaned up as per the above bylaw. A letter was issued to the occupant of the home on April 25th, 2020, advising the occupant to have that issue rectified within 7 days. In the above bylaw, inspector means the Director of Fire Services, Director of Police Services, Building Inspector, Director of Municipal Services, or a designate who is to carry out the duties assigned by the Chief Administrative Officer pursuant to this bylaw. As per section 6.1 of the City of Summerside's Dangerous, Hazardous, and Unsightly Premises Bylaw, CS-11, all property shall be kept clean and free of objects or conditions that may create fire, health, or accident hazards. B, litter. The alternatives are to leave as is. The advantage is to bring the property back up to standard as per the City of Summerside's dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly premises bylaw, CS 11. The disadvantages, none foreseen. The cost and financial impact. The cost is an estimate of $600 or $700. They're not exactly sure on that, but to be initially borne by the city and invoiced to the occupant. So that's the recommendation, and I will open the floor to anybody that would like to speak on this concern.
Will the invoice be to,
Chief?
Councillor Ramsey, would the invoice be to the occupants or the owner of the building?
To the occupants. Yeah. So Chief Dave, I think, has.
If I may, that section is 6.4, not 6.1, Councillor.
Yep, 6.4. Did I say 1? I have 4 here.
All right. Yeah, Your Worship, the bylaw states the invoice can be sent to the occupant or the homeowner. In this case, the homeowner, I spoke to her a few months ago, sent a registered letter, came back. Now we can't find her. I don't know if she just gave up. So anyway, we've been after the occupant now since October, I believe. The officer visited the property on Sunday to see how I was getting along. He started to clean up or move stuff around or hide it. But in his opinion, it's not cleaned up enough.
I got pictures sent to me today. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah. Now, the gentleman that lives or not lives is a vacant lot behind this residence that's owned by a city resident as well. He's supposed to clean up some stumps there, so he's in the process of getting that cleaned up.
Thank you, Chief Poirier. Councillor Snow?
I'm very happy to see this coming forward tonight. I have to start with that. Obviously, it's been something that has been an issue for the last number of years. Actually, since being elected, it's one of the first complaints I received from some residents in the area. And after seeing the pictures tonight, I've been by it many times, but one just has to look at the pictures and see why neighboring properties would have a concern. And not to kick a dead horse, but I'm going to kick. My other concern would be the number of hours that our police services, our police officers have put into this, not only in the last month since October, but last year as well, because there was hours put into it and contacts made with the homeowner, the occupant, and it goes to show my need and want for us to really look at ways we can have a bylaw officer in place to address these issues instead of taking valuable police hours and dealing with these situations. So we all seen the great work that's been done lately by our police officers with some significant issues around our city, and that's what they should be focusing on, not this type of stuff. So again, I'm calling on my fellow councillors to find a way to get behind this, because we definitely need to look at getting a bylaw officer in place. So other than that, I'm very supportive of this going forward, and getting it resolved once and for all.
Thank you, Councillor Snow. Councillor Duran?
Thanks, Councillor Ramsey. I know I'm certainly in support of it as well, but just, I guess, in discussing this property and this property alone here tonight, I know among the public it might raise some questions about some other properties that might be in the same condition or situation. And I know this isn't the time or the place for individual reports, but is there something in terms of maybe a brief update as to what might be happening at other locations in this regard, either by yourself or CAO Rob or Chief Poirier?
Well, I know that police services have gotten back to me on a number of occasions here with some issues. So I know they're working diligently on these unsightly properties. So That's what I'm receiving back from police services. So, Dave, yeah, go ahead.
Sure, Councillor Duran, we can get you an update on all the recent files.
Okay, great. And not that they're not that, I mean, I'm personally not receiving, I'm not being hounded for these updates, but I know there are a few that we've discussed over the last number of months, and just because we're discussing this one tonight, I know it might, people might hear that and think, okay, well, what about the other ones, kind of thing?
And I think what I don't know, Brian Harlick, if you can put the photograph of the actual mess in the yard. I don't know if you could put up for our viewers to see, just to give folks an idea on what we're dealing with. I mean, it's not,
He's on
it's
the
not
way
a
out.
couple of bags of garbage by any means. So I don't know if Brian, you could do that or not, but while we're still discussing this. Oh, you have one there, Justin.
Brian's on the way out. He was just sitting at my table here, was getting some feedback out of it.
Oh, okay, and he may be able to bring that up. But Carrie, you had a question or a statement?
Yeah, I just I wanted to follow up on what Councillor Snow was saying, that while we appreciate so much the work that the police services have done, it's not fair to them as well as a first responder to be put in a situation to go into a property like this. It's one thing if they're going into it during the day and they can see some of the dangers that, you know, might be ahead of them. But if there was a fire or if police were called in at night, you know, this is quite dangerous to come upon. So we have to be mindful of that too, whenever we're, you know, whenever we're thinking of putting our, you know, our employees in situations where they might have to put themselves in danger to keep the rest of us safe. So I think that was a big thing for the neighbors nearby too. I think that they'll be very pleased because it's, everybody has great pride in their properties in the area. And I think they'll be very happy with the work that's been done on this one for sure.
Thank
Not
you.
necessarily the backyard, could be the front yard too, it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think Councillor McDougall, thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor McDougall, you had to.
Hi, I just, yeah, I drove by there and it is a mess, and it will, you know, the success of this one will probably trigger more. There was on the alternatives, it says leave as is. I don't know why we would put that there, because that should not be left as is, and or any of them. I think if it comes to a council concern, that the option of leaving it as is probably not one that we need to have there. So anyway, great job.
Mink, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
Save on some mink. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, save on some ink.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Councillor McDougall.
Councillor Ramsey, just, is this going to be a recommendation, or would it be any stronger if we had it in the form of a resolution of council?
So I think what CAO and I spoke about today, and maybe you'd like to take this, would you, CAO Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ramsey. So if council is in support of this recommendation going forward, what would happen is that after this evening, this recommendation would then go to the monthly meeting of council on the 17th. And assuming that the resolution is approved at that meeting, then
Okay.
that gives us the legal authority to move on this particular issue and act.
Thank you.
Okay, and I believe it's May 19th.
18th, sorry,
That's
yeah.
close. We could have it on Sunday night if you want, that's okay. But anyway, it is the 19th. And so I think with the 7-day that they were given to have it cleaned up, is that up as of tomorrow, CAO?
The 7 days, I think, had expired on this past Saturday, Councillor. Yeah, because it was issued, the notice was issued to the occupant the Saturday before. So the 7 days was up this past Saturday.
Okay, thank you. Chief Dave.
Oh, sorry, Chief.
No problem. Councillor Ramsey, just for everyone's information, the gentleman who's living in that residence has been advised that it was going to council this week.
Okay,
So this will give him more time. I mean, the officer's still going to be checking every couple of days to make sure he's still working on it. Whether he's going to get rid of it all, I don't know.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Counselor Barr?
Oh, sorry,
I
Counselor.
did. I know that we're speaking of residential, and I believe there might be some information coming forth tonight on different vacant business buildings, empty vacant buildings. And I'm just wondering if this same type of a recommendation would also apply to some of those empty buildings that are maybe not owned by anyone. Some of them have, you know, a lot of problems, live animals in them. And this is the time of year where we are starting to receive complaints on them. So I'd like to put that to council, maybe in our discussion tonight, if that type of a recommendation would apply to businesses as well.
Well, I would certainly think it would, Chief Poirier. I guess that's.
If I could just clarify, Deputy Mayor, just with respect to that particular issue, that, you know, if there's any complaints or observations that you or your constituents have made around some of these vacant properties, you can refer them to us, and we'll make sure that they are followed up on.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess what we have to decide tonight is, are we recommending that after it's 7 days has already passed, are we recommending that they go in tomorrow and start to clean up this property, or are we waiting until our council meeting and to bring a resolution there? That's the next question, I guess, for folks.
I would,
Go ahead.
Where are you, Brian?
can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
hear you. We
Yeah.
can't see you, but
I
we
got,
can hear you.
I got knocked out, a little power jolt here or something, everything shut down. I wonder if we could add that to the agenda for the special meeting tomorrow night to expedite. It has to go to a council meeting, I think, does it not?
Should, yeah.
Yes.
And if we, whether we wait for the monthly meeting or add it to the agenda for the special meeting tomorrow night.
Okay.
Just,
We'll take
it's
it
just-
under advisement, Councillor McFeely. If we can have it done tomorrow night, we certainly will. We just need to confirm with legal to be sure.
Understood.
Neighbors would be very pleased if we could process it tomorrow night.
Very happy.
Yes, I know. Okay, so then I'll just recommend that it go to our special council meeting on May 6th. And I guess if that's everything on that, guys, I guess I should have asked if anyone has any more questions.
No, not a question. I just again want to say that it's an important step I think we're taking. But to Deputy Mayor's point, and there's a lot of these type of issues that are just not being addressed throughout the city that really are starting to show their years and the negative impact. I know I've received just a call yesterday, so on a building, and you don't even have an explanation for them. So it's very important that we start taking an aggressive step on some of these, so we can sort of change the path that these buildings are taking. So thank you to our fellow councillors on going ahead, and obviously our chief and his staff for the work they've done. Although I'd like you not to be doing it, but anyway, we'll go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor Snow. And I guess that's it for police services. If,
Thank you. Nothing to report in fire or
no, nothing to report in fire.
emergency
Well, we will have a report, of course,
monthly.
on the 19th. Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Councillor Ramsey.
thank you.
Okay, we'll continue on. I believe tech services is next on the agenda. Councillor Duran, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. For tonight, Technical Services Committee, we just have 2 or 3 really discussion points at this time with no directives attached. It's just some things to discuss and hopefully have some updates come out of it. And if direction comes out of any of these things, then so be it. But first item up for the Tech Services Committee concerns the work being done at Hillside and Haley, and I believe Councillor Adams may have brought this forward to tonight's agenda.
So what I was wondering is I had residents that live in the area. This those two streets had work done, infill work done last year. Unfortunately, we had Hurricane Dorian come in and wash away wash away the seed and the soil. So there's some low spots, couple little spots that have sunk that need more soil, the reseeding. So I know it's early, and due to everybody being home more, they're out in their yards doing more work, but I've had several calls wondering when Kern and Briggs are going to be back to finish that work.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Adams. Just in terms of the work that is remained to be done, yes, you're correct. This was work that was supposed to be finished by Kern and Briggs last fall, but then, as we know, Dorian had hit and we had to deal with that. So normally usually what we see year to year in terms of getting this type of repair work done, traditionally, and it is weather dependent, we've usually started this work around somewhere close to the May long weekend. Sometimes we start a little bit earlier if the weather cooperates and it's suitable for landscaping and reseeding. And again, it comes down to the contractor in this case. I mean, they have different crews that work for example, paving, driveway repairs, sidewalk work, manhole adjustment, all that sort of thing. It's just a matter of getting that work coordinated. But just to come back to it, it's really more just weather dependent. If we can try to get that work started, or if they can try to get that work started a little bit better, or earlier if the weather cooperates, all the better. And we'll certainly do that. Aaron, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add from a scheduling perspective.
That's all accurate information, Rob. The only thing additional is that all the contracts that are ready to start on the other bigger jobs haven't started yet either. All the contractors have to come up with procedures that are going to allow them to operate during this COVID situation. So they have to have written procedures of how they're going to do everything. They want to have all those approved and prior to starting any jobs. So if they start a job, they don't want to have to shut down. They're in the process of dealing with those with the whole construction industry and getting them approved by the province and the various agencies. So that's the only extra part. But yes, we still are on our normal path for, as Rob stated, the May long weekend. They did drive by, and that's their intention, is they went by and had a look at it, and they feel towards the end of May is, but again, if the weather stays like this, it may be pushed back, but that's their intention, is to have a crew, because they know they have to landscape the seed, and the weather has to be suitable for the seed to take and then not have to go back again.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, is there anything else with respect to Hillside and Halley?
Well, that's great. I appreciate the update. I just wanted a few residents had asked, so I figured we'd bring it forward and get an update for everybody. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Okay. Next item is a crosswalks update. With that, Director Greg, did you want to speak to that, or does somebody want to kind of introduce the topic?
I could certainly introduce the topic and then turn it over to Director Gregg for any more details. I believe Councillor Adams had requested an update on some crosswalks initiatives that were discussed during the budget process a couple of months ago. And during that time, we had discussed certain things about looking at what are some, I guess I wouldn't say pilot projects necessarily, but what are maybe some innovations and different things that we could try to consider as a municipality for crosswalks coming up in this construction season. Residents will certainly notice that we've done some things around the city, such as the flags that have been situated at various locations for crosswalk notification. And also we have what's called the rectangular rapid flash beacon. Those are the solar traffic signs that you see on South Drive and Water Street East. So we're certainly incorporating some of those given the increasing traffic numbers. One of the things that we have talked about, and I'll certainly let Greg fill in more of the details, it's around the concept of three-dimensional sidewalks. And it's something that we are looking at this construction season. And I'll certainly turn it over to Greg, and he can help provide council with a little bit more context and background.
Sure. So to be specific on the locations, You'll remember that we did 3 flag locations. We tried late fall last year, which actually worked quite well over the winter. I thought there was some positive feedback from the community in the city on them. So the next phase is do you want more flags and where would they be best suited? The third thing was the rapid rectangular flashing beacons that were upgraded on South Drive for the school crosswalk there to Greensfield School. And also their rapid rectangular flashing beacons were also installed at the Tim Hortons crosswalk, I believe. And there was an upgrade there last year for the crosswalk at Tim Hortons in downtown Water Street. As well, the flags that were specifically put in were for roughly right at Sonny's Dairy Bar to go to the boardwalk. And again, just adjacent to the Hustle Gym on Water Street. And the final one was at the CIBC bank in the downtown core, where there was actually no actuated intersection there. So we put flags in there. So we did talk about a third option, which was a 3D painting model of a crosswalk. And we never really arrived at a location. And I thought it would be a good exercise if council wanted to take a look at our crosswalk map, which shows all the crosswalks and all the school zones and daycares on the same map, that you may want to, as a group, select 1 or 2 to try and see how they're received by the community in some areas this year. And we can get that done as a third option. There was a fourth option also looked at, which was center line crosswalk signs in like the median, the center of the road, to kind of put like a candlestick type thing that says crosswalk in the middle of the road. We looked at those, but normally we didn't really promote that as a great option. For one thing, the crosswalks with normally the higher volume areas are fairly rapid, and it's better to do a different system. And school zones are out in the summer, and then we'd be taking them up in the winter for plowing. So we decided to kind of put that on the shelf for a bit. The fourth thing that also happened was through the police department, where they actually increased the solar speed signs on Water Street East that we just recently relocated to be more visual on Water Street East. And also another one just where Water Street meets South Drive there, coming into town by Mackenzie Drive. So those really were the initiatives that we started. So probably the one that's left is probably the 3D painting one that can be undertaken for a recommendation if council wants input to that process. And we can furnish everybody with a map, and you guys can circle the ones you think that would be of interest.
So you're giving us some homework now.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be a good collaborative effort. That way you could maybe ask your constituents too if they have any input, because it's a very minor task. It's just some paint, right? So,
Councillor Duran, just have a quick question, or is there somebody else ahead of me?
There was Councillor McDougall and Councillor Ramsey.
I don't see my button here to get my hand up. I'm not sure where it is.
Just knock on the wall real hard and I'll hear you.
All right.
Just a quick question, Greg. That 3D sidewalk, I think, is great. And, you know, when I think of where would it get the best use, one of the spots is that downtown. Even though we have the flashing lights there, I see people darting across there, and it's I don't know, they're playing chicken there all the time. But the other question I had too was the speed sign that is been located there by the Tides apartment building, and at the end of where South and Water Street meet. Just wondering why that wasn't located out. I'd rather slow them down before they get there. Out up towards the school or whatever on South Drive, out further. I've had that question a number of times, why they just put it there.
Yeah, it was coordinated with police services. They kind of picked the general location where they thought it'd be best, but we've moved the other one on Water Street East. It was a fairly small job to move. It doesn't take much with the solar power unit, so it can be relocated wherever police services or the community thinks it might suit best. It only takes less than half a day to move the units, so they're pretty versatile.
I'd like to see it moved out further, out South Drive, if that's possible. But
Not to butt in line, but I don't mind butting in line here. I agree with you, Bruce. great to have move one back up south. I'd rather see us get another one and move the one that you're talking about sort of closer to that waterfront boardwalk. I know a lot of the residents along Water Street, right on the boardwalk, have complained about speed going through there, be it trucks, cars, and with the high pedestrian there. The question I received was, how come it's not closer to the boardwalk? So I understand totally what you're saying, Bruce, and why people would want one farther up south. But ideally, I'd like to see us probably, instead of moving it out of that area where there are a lot of pedestrians, find a way to add another one to our system, because I do think they work very well if they're located well. And I think with the high volume of pedestrians in that boardwalk area, it makes a lot of sense to have one down there somewhere, maybe spread them out a little bit further and move it closer to the boardwalk. But that's all. I didn't want to interrupt, but I just, with it being moved out of that area, I was a little bit concerned.
Okay, Councillor Ramsey, did you have something to?
Well, I just wanted to say to Greg, I think this 3D crosswalk idea is awesome, and I'd be really interested in looking at the map. I think they'd be great for the school zones. And so that would be something I would be interested in. I'm not sure about the rest of council if they'd be interested in looking at that, but I certainly would. I think it's a good idea to try it. I think we should try it. I like the flags. I love the way they're working. People are really happy with those. So the other place I think we could put a flag would be at the Tim Hortons on Granville Street, where people cross there to go to the mall. They just booter across there because they're terrified. So with the turning lane and the light where you can go straight, and they're always afraid. So maybe one of those up there might be something we could think about as well, because I think they've been very effective. And that's all I have to say.
Mayor Basil.
Yes, I know we're talking about crosswalks, but Greg, and I mentioned this before about the crosswalks being painted. And today with snow coming down, obviously it's too cold and too wet, but do you have an estimate time when they may be started? I guess we don't have the concern that so far that there will be school, because like other years, because I guess there's no school, or probably not will be any this year. But do you have an estimate time when they might be starting the crosswalks?
Sure. We just reviewed that yesterday, actually. We were hoping to get the right-of-way repairs with topsoil and seed, a lot of that tidied up by the end of this week, but the weather delayed us this week, so it's looking to be finishing up probably next week. And traffic painting is looking to start the following week after that. So it's that 5th, 12th, probably about around the May 15th, which is about 2 weeks earlier than when we normally start due to the better start of temperature. But so we should get an earlier jump on it, and we'll start the painting cycle at the latest on May the 15th.
Okay, the new street sweeper wouldn't scrape them off, wouldn't it?
No.
Okay, no, that's great, Greg. Thanks very much.
Councillor McFeely and Councillor Campbell.
Okay, just a comment on the 3D crosswalk. I think that's a great idea. Do we have any data on crosswalk usage, like where the volume traffic areas are, pedestrian traffic area?
Yeah, so when we created the crosswalk inventory mapping, there was a committee or a task force set up of municipal services, police services, and tech services. And we created a map with, and then also created different markings recommended for the traffic volumes on each street. So really the markings and the application of the crosswalks are dictated by the speed of the road and the volume of traffic is how we delegated it for city use. The 3D effect is fairly new. I don't know if there's a lot of good evidence on the actual effect from the 3D.
So we don't have any data on present use of crosswalks across town, like pedestrian counts and that type of thing at all?
No, other than those areas that were looked at very anecdotally, probably 1 or 2 day visits on those areas that were being debated on an increased infrastructure. There was a few studies done, but very anecdotal at the start, Councillor McFeely.
Yeah, and I would agree that the Tim Horton Holland College crosswalk would be a worthy site for consideration
I think so.
with the volume there. And one of the frustrations there is, from a pedestrian's perspective, is when you press the button, you have no way of knowing whether that flashing lights went on, and there's no indicator for the pedestrian that the flashing light has went on.
That's right.
And it's really quite dangerous because you step out thinking that that flashing light's on, and it may or may not be. So I don't know if that can be a consideration as well.
Councillor Campbell and Councillor Snow.
Thank you. Talking about crosswalks, I got an issue up here on McEwen, up in this end. If anybody ever comes up this way, there's a pile of traffic, and I got the Green Garden homes up here have 48 units with at least 2 people in them, and the sidewalk is on the other side of McEwen, and they got to get them across. And it looks like we're going to have another development up here with a large apartment building, so you're going to have at least probably 70 some units up here on the wrong side of the road. And the only way we can get them across the only way we can have a crosswalk would be in Craig, or like at the end of the street. So it looks like it should be a sidewalk. The only thing that would fix it, but checking with Aaron, I don't think we can have sidewalks on both sides of McEwen Road up here.
We
So
can have it, we just do not have sidewalks on both sides of streets.
We should be informed of this and made quite aware of it. We're going to be putting out building permits for a large apartment building up here in the woods. We've got to get the people out of there across to where they can walk.
Director Greg or Director Aaron, can you briefly speak to our crosswalk bylaw in that we currently, you can't have a crosswalk unless it's at an intersection. So like, I know there's areas like what Councillor Campbell is explaining, and there's another one by the French school and in front of the tax center. Is that a big no-no? Like never ever add crosswalks unless they're at an intersection, or is that something that is possible in some areas?
Typically, yes, they're not mid-block crossings. They're not expected where a driver's expecting people or pedestrians are going to cross. If you're inviting them to walk out in the middle of cars, whereas you get to an intersection is where normally you're expecting pedestrians to cross. Pedestrians have the right of way at a stop at an intersection. And in some locations, the next level is making it an actual crosswalk. Again, the various levels, as Greg pointed out in that document, starting off with lines, zebra painting, signage, different types of treatments, up to the newer in the last few years, those rapid flashings, as well as the next highest level then will be the ones that exist in 4 or 5 locations with the overhead ones. So there's a whole criteria set out to determine where they locate, and then, as Greg mentioned, based on the volume of traffic and the speed and what type of treatment actually you put up for a crosswalk location.
Right. Okay.
Perhaps if I might suggest, Councillor Dwyer, in the report, there was actually a draft policy in the report that talked about how crosswalks could be warranted for need. And there was a process there in the document, which can be sent around as well, perhaps with the map. It's quite a lengthy document, but you'll get a sense of the whole report if you take the time to read it. And it might be something that the GPRS committee could take a look at to see if they want to do something like that for the city of Summerside.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great to get. I know it may have been sent out last year.
Just so everybody can. What was that?
I don't know, but Aaron didn't like it.
Heard in the eardrum.
Especially if you got earphones in, yeah.
I've seen that, yeah.
Screen. Maybe not anymore.
Justin, you're breaking up.
Am I okay now?
Yep.
I didn't do anything. Okay, Councillor Snow, did you still have your thumb you wanted to put up?
Yeah. So just because people were mentioning locations, I thought I better get in on it. That Maple and Central location where there is park splash pad and high pedestrian volume would be a great location for either 3D or flags or just anything in that area. Hopefully there will be a lot of users using the splash park this summer when we're able to get out and about, and it would just be a wise location, I think, during the summer months. So there's something for thought.
Just to give council as well some of the budget considerations, the set of flags is about a $250 investment. The rapid rectangular flashing beacons are about $4,000 a set, approximately. And the paintings probably somewhere in the vicinity of the flags. It's probably around $250 to $300. So just to give you an idea of the level of cost to the budget when you're making your decisions on what you think is needed where for crosswalks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just while we're on the topic of locations, Greenwood Drive, by where the trail crosses, would be another spot where something might be needed because that's a higher speed area. Did anyone else have anything on Councillor Adams?
I just had one quick before you move on to something else. A lot of residents had mentioned we had some issues with crosswalk lights, the metal or whatever that was happening in this spring, summer, fall last year. So when those were down and staff took the flags and placed them in those locations, that was great. It was very much appreciated by the residents. So having a couple sets on hand just for items like that when staff is doing the work to things like that would be great. It was really appreciated by residents. I know when the one was out for a bit on the corner of Small and Water Street East, it was well used and appreciated. So thanks for that.
We should maybe put bottles of hand sanitizer in the buckets.
Yeah, true.
Next item, Councillor CIO Rob.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. I just wanted to just close off this part of the discussion that thank you to members of council for your feedback on some of these areas that you want us to follow up on. We will, myself and Directors Greg and Aaron will have a discussion about which of these areas would probably merit further attention, whether it's on a pilot basis or what have you. And we'll circle back in due course with an update on how we would see this unfolding this summer. Okay.
Great. Rob, just in you saying that, I know we're going to be asking for resident input on this as well. Would maybe putting a post up on the city channels, encouraging some replies, be okay? Rather than, I know we're all going to be doing it on our own channels, but maybe if the city does it as well, it'll look less, biased for our wards. And then we can compile that list and see if there's any commonalities.
I think that's coming from you, Justin.
Can't hear you again, Justin.
Am I back?
Back.
Okay.
Can
I think we must have rural internet here at City Hall. Did everybody get that about just putting it up on the city channel? Yeah. That's okay if everybody, okay. Deputy Mayor McCollum?
Yes, I also have an interest around Ward 6 in the downtown area, but I haven't really said anything tonight because I know a lot of the different councillors representing their wards were speaking. But I think, is there going to be any type of a rating based on how busy the intersection is, where the greatest number of pedestrians are? For example, I'm thinking at Legier splash pad area. In the summer, it's really, really busy. And I think there are a number of residents that have concern there because that's a mix of all age ranges. So I'm just wondering if we have a look at the map that Director Greg is talking about, is there going to be a rating system on where the need is the greatest?
So Deputy Mayor, just in response to your question, we're going to take all the feedback on proposed locations from Council Beck, and we'll assess, look at what information we already have with respect to traffic counts, pedestrian traffic, whatever information we already have on hand, and we'll bring back some recommendations to Council. Okay.
Great, awesome. Anything else from anybody? for crosswalks? No. So we'll move on to the last item for tech services. I believe Councillor Snow probably brought this forward, unless maybe there was an update ready from director or CIO, and that is the air handling unit at iOS.
I did ask for it to be put on this last week. There's been some discussion between myself and emails back and forth between myself, Mike, and I think Aaron was in on it as well. A ways back, there was a request that they get some pricing on ways to lessen the noise for the neighboring properties for the air exchange and the generator. At the same time, we decided to go ahead with the generator at St. Elners for our emergency shelter, which was great. On that generator, there is going to be a sound enclosure. So just proves the point that if you're putting a generator in a residential area or around other residents, it's sort of the polite thing to do, is make sure that we're not bothering the neighbors. So there's been a price that has come back for the enclosure of the generator. And then we've received some options for ways to address the air handling noise for the neighboring property as well. There's 3 options for that. And the idea is to, ideally, we should be moving ahead with the enclosure for the generator like we are gonna for the St. Elners Fire Department. So it'd be nice to that we get direction that we can move ahead with that. And then I'd really like them to look into the 3 options further, and the prices for the 3 options vary. One being a significant cost to construct a wall, the others doing some sound dampening work on the unit. But again, the residents that live close by have complained about this for years, since the renovation was done to iOS, which was a great renovation and something we needed within our city. But then again, we can't do it in an area and affect the neighboring properties. So I would like the support of fellow councillors that we can move this ahead and finally get this off the table for the neighbors that surround the iOS building.
And Councillor Snow, if I may, just for clarification, you are correct. There's 3 options that have been proposed in terms of trying to mitigate the noise levels coming out of this unit. One of these options has already been tried, where we tried putting some, I guess, efforts on the compressors that met with little success. There was another option which would involve building up the fence next to the unit, probably by a couple of feet, but even then that was deemed at the time probably not was going to result in much success. What we're looking for from council in terms of direction this evening, and Aaron, jump in if I've misrepresent this, is that there is a 3rd option that would look at building an entire enclosure around the unit, but we'd have to do some further work to explore whether it would be sufficient to address the issues and the concerns of your constituents. We'd have to bring back a recommendation to council if it turns out in our research that this option would probably work. And just to put council on notice is that if we were to proceed with this work, it would probably be in the area of about 50 to 60,000 unbudgeted. Now, having said that, if council is supportive of us proceeding with that expenditure down the road, we'll certainly do that, and we'll certainly identify a funding source. But I just wanted to put that clarification out there.
The only thing I would add there, Rob, is the option number 1 was finding out the noisiest part of the apparatus, air handling unit, and insulated blankets that was option 1. They were manufactured and placed on the unit. The second one was they found the next noisiest part was the fans on the top, was to try to make some metal and go a couple feet higher, trying to deflect the noise up, but that's not going to work in a snow environment. That's just going to trap snow and be in top of the fans. The 3rd option, as you mentioned, was to build a wall 7 meters or 25 feet tall at the boundary line which at the time we didn't think was a viable option, but it's still being considered now. That's what's really being on the table to be considered.
It's a thorough update.
I guess the other option would be, not the option, but there's two issues on this property. The other is the generator, which Mike has got back, Mike Tuska has got back the prices to address that. So if that's something we could consider, there is money in a pot, is my understanding, for iOS building for probably this type of stuff, other issues that may arise. This is an issue for the neighbors. I received a video the other day, and be it our staff might have been just in there, you know, making sure the unit works, but it's noisy and it's and it bothers the neighbors. So it's something we should at least consider, especially given the fact that we're moving ahead with the same thing at St. Elner's Fire Department. So I think it's a reasonable request, especially on the generator, and we'll continue to look at that air exchanger, but I know the neighboring property would really like something done with that air exchanger.
Could I have just a comment there, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
If there was one going to the St. Helens Fire Department, there are houses fairly close to that as well. So, but this one will be looked after regarding noise, or no noise, or not as much noise?
Yes, Your Worship. The option that we're seeking some direction from council on whether we should explore this third option, which would involve constructing a much larger enclosure around the unit. I guess what Aaron is referring to is that we need to do some further evaluation as to whether this will be the solution that would ultimately work, because we wouldn't want to go out and spend whatever it is, 50 to 60,000 on this type of unit and then find out at the end of the day, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, right?
But his worship was asking, I was talking about the generator. So at iOS building, there's two separate units that are causing issues on each side of the building. One, the generator, which we have the price back for an enclosure. It is what is recommended to sound dampen a generator. It's what we are doing at the St. Elner's Fire Department with houses. I would almost guess that would be farther apart than the houses in question at iOS building.
Yeah.
But
not too far.
But we're doing it there, and we're not doing it at the iOS building, which raises my eyebrows to say why. Why wasn't it done previously when we decided to do the renovations in the first point at iOS building? We're considering the residents close to the St. Elner's Fire Department, which we totally should. But we should do the same for the iOS building. We should all be treating them identical.
Yeah, that's the reason I mentioned that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we don't want to create another problem until we get this one solved.
Correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
If council will give us that direction, then we'll certainly proceed.
So if I may, there's just to give you, it's Greg Goody talking here. The generator at the West Drive, you can just give an idea of what you get for your sound attenuation level from a generator at 7 meters away from the unit. So if you can see my little hand here, the one at the unhoused, and then you have an attenuated level 2 and a level 1. So you're still at 70 dB for a sound level at 21 meters, just to give you an idea of what you get for your option when you do execute it. The ones down below, the sound power level at the unit itself, even with level 2, is still at quite a high level right from the generator, but it knocks it down quite a bit with the attenuation at about 21 feet. So just to give you an idea of what numbers you're looking at, it still will have some noise level to it, but it's below the hearing protection level required with IPL Health and Safety. That's at 80 dB, and 70 dB is the number at 7 meters, and a typical conversation is about 50 to 55 dB, just to give you a reference of what that is.
Thanks, Greg. I'm not 100% sure, and like I said, the distance from the noise, if you have a nice home and sitting out in the backyard, and you can still hear it roaring, even though it's not as loud as it was. But I guess the the next period of time, we'll get it sorted out.
Will there be regular run-ups of the unit at St. Eleanor's, or will it just be running in winter, whenever it's needed?
So my director of economic development, Mike Tathuska, asked me to look up the numbers for the IOS building, and over the last year, it ran for a total of 14 hours in the run of a year, give or take a few minutes, and it actually started and stopped 10 times in the last roughly 11 months. So that's usually the frequency of the testing from the power plant staff. Is usually we test them. Normally we test them every week, but those sensitive ones we've been testing once a month just to keep the run times down and the noise level abated.
What time of the day?
That's a great question. Usually it's usually done in the morning on Friday mornings. Most people are at work, but some may not be. Depending on the shift schedules, I guess they work. We usually do it on Friday mornings or Friday afternoon.
And some work from home is the other issue.
Right.
Deputy Mayor McCollum, and then Councillor Ramsey.
I think one of the takeaway lessons that just with all of the discussion tonight and discussions previously from this is that if the city does find itself in a situation where there are other proposed projects or developments that we become involved with, it would be important to do some type of a technical services, maybe assessment of anything that, say this situation, how it's created a noise factor. And I think when we entered into that, we didn't recognize that that was going to be such an issue with people because the building was there first, basically as a business as the old co-op, and some of these things might have been added on. So I think as a direction or a recommendation, it would be important for us to do a pre-assessment of anything that would involve a building where there might be areas that could create problems. And I'm looking at the budgeted expense of $50,000 to $60,000. That's a pretty high price tag that possibly we weren't anticipating. So maybe a bit of an assessment beforehand of any kind of a future project would be really a prudent thing to do. Just my thoughts on it.
Is that including the St. Eleanor's one?
The fire hall?
Yeah.
Well, I think with the fire hall, that being an institutional building that has been existing, I think people would embrace the fact that what it's being utilized for. But I just think we've learned a pretty valuable lesson here. And I guess it's like moving forward, it would be another tool in the toolkit for us to do an assessment, just to make sure that there's nothing we were going to run into that will come out of the bushes after the fact.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, the assessment would tell us, the one at the fire hall in St. Eleanor's, how close it would be to the neighbors.
Sure. Well, it could be helpful. It could save money down the road.
The one at St. Eleanor's, though, is going to have a sound enclosure. That's the difference of the two projects. The one that went ahead at IOS building wasn't considered for a sound enclosure, but for whatever reason, and maybe it was the complaints that came from the IOS building, we decided to go ahead with an enclosure. I think the right thing to do, and it's not $60,000 for the enclosure of the generator. I think it's in that $10,000 to $13,000 range. I know I had the information sent to me this week, but that is something that we need to go ahead and move on because it is a fix to a problem we have, and there's money set in a pot for the IOS building. It's not out of our budget that we have for this year. There's money sitting there, and we're running into an issue with this building. It's our building. I think it's the right thing to do. We need to correct the problems we created.
Could I just ask a question to you there, Councillor? In regards to that noise shelter, whatever you call it, the one for the IOS building, and just going back to the numbers that Greg Goody was mentioning there, does this completely do away with the sound, or is it still going to be roaring somewhat? I'm not sure on those numbers what it brought it down to.
I'm not sure on the sound enclosure for the air exchange. I think it's important that they take a look at it because it is a big expense if we go with that third option. I think it's important they look at it and see what that is going to change. But the enclosure for the generator, I think, is something we can move ahead on, knowing it is recommended for the St. Helens Fire Department. Otherwise, why are we doing it at the St. Helens Fire Department? There'd be an added cost to it there that we are incurring. So we should consider the same thing at the IOS building, or it should have been considered previously.
Well,
I think that's Councilor Coleman's point about getting an assessment before.
Right.
can I say something here? So Greg, I just need you to clear this up. Are you saying that that machine, the only noise that they get is 10 times a year when you turn that on a Friday morning, once a month?
That's correct. Plus any extended power outages in that area when the generator comes on to support the operations of the IOS building. We didn't have the ability to track the exact times and length of each run, but we do know it started and stopped 10 times, and the whole duration of those runs was a total of 14 hours and 23 minutes, I believe.
So can we not work something out with the people that live in that home to say, we are going to run this machine once a month, and even come up with a time where we could schedule so that it doesn't bother anybody? Like if it's just if it's 14 hours a year that we're concerned about here, is that what we're really talking about?
Councilor Ramsey, with all due respect, I think that's exactly what we're talking about, because we are doing something totally different at St. Helens. It was an issue that was brought forward, and we discussed it.
Corey, you've had your say. Just let me say what I had to say. Like, can we not come up with some kind of an agreement with these people, these folks in that area, for the sake of 14 hours for 1 year, and not spend $60,000? Like, can we not have a little schedule to say, this might be the best time to run this for 14 hours? Like,
No,
I mean,
okay.
it's gotta be reasonable.
If I may,
We're getting information mixed up here, guys. The 14 hours is the generator with a sound enclosure. That is it's 10 to 13,000 to put that enclosure. It's the exact same thing we're doing at the St. Helens Fire Department. The air exchanger, the enclosure we're talking about, runs pretty much constantly to exchange air in the IOS building. So that's the difference between the two. So there's two separate units at the IOS building. One is directly over a back fence of a property. You can go into their back fence, sit in their yard, and the air exchanger pretty much blows into their backyard with noise. That's what it's like in their backyard. So that is the sixth thing. That's right, exactly. So the generator enclosure was 10 to 13,000. I don't have the exact amount. It's 10 to 13,000. The point being that is that they're doing the exact same thing out at St. Helens Fire Department, where it's going to run whatever 10 to 13 hours. I think it's the right thing to do. You try to minimize the impact on neighbors.
Just a moment, Corey, but that's not going to eliminate the problem. That's not going to eliminate the problem. There's still going to be the air exchange. So how are we,
They're two separate issues. They're on separate ends of the building and affecting neighbors in different areas. So there's two streets, IOS building, that connect, and the neighboring properties are the ones that are complaining. So
I know
there's
on one end there isn't anybody, right? It's just a parking lot.
And there's houses across the street and next. That's where the generator. So I received a video the other day. I will forward you the video I received to all councils after we leave this, that he was in his yard and the generator was running. Yes, if it's 14 hours, whatever, that I don't know what time it runs, but the point I'm making is we're doing the exact same thing at St. Helens with the intent. We're going to put an enclosure around it so it doesn't bother the neighbors. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Because there's an added cost to doing that in St. Helens. It's same as there'd be an added cost to do it here. So that's all I'm saying. We've decided it's the best thing to do is to enclose that unit at St. Helens, unless there's another reason for it that somebody wants to explain. I would assume it's so it's not so noisy. That's the point of a sound enclosure.
Okay. Anyway, I guess I was assuming that it was 14 hours a year that we were concerned about. And that I think I'm certainly a reasonable person. I would reason with someone for 14 hours a year, but I guess if it's all the time, like you say, that's then another story,
That's the air exchanger. Yeah. On one property.
Just as a point to council, I think myself, I would recommend investing in the sound enclosure. the level, I just wanted to point out to council that the level drops to roughly 70 dB. It won't be like quiet purring like a kitten. It'll still have some noise to it, but it will definitely be significantly reduced. And
And that's $13,000, not 60.
correct.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
But
Yeah.
that's one of two issues. We
Yeah.
still have to look at and hopefully direct staff to see what options are for that other air exchanger.
Yeah,
So
and there's
where
really
did-
one option that needs,
Where did we come up with $60,000? That's my question.
we had some preliminary discussions with WSP, an engineering consulting firm here in Summerside. They had provided this as very much a very preliminary estimate as to what it would cost to address this issue. But I guess to go back to Councillor Snow's point, Councillor Ramsey, is that what we're trying to seek direction on, in addition to the generator, we've already had that discussion. We're seeking some direction from council as to whether they want us to further explore this other option for the for enclosing the air handling unit. It may or may not work, and that's why, like, we want to. If council's okay with us exploring that option, we will certainly do that and bring back a recommendation. Is that if it turns out that it can be addressed, it's probably going to run somewhere around 50 to 60,000 to address it. That's all.
Air exchange, that has nothing to do with the
Generator.
generator. Okay, so they're two separate items. Okay. All right, I wasn't clear on that. Okay. Was anybody else clear on that? Was that just me?
I was.
Well, I certainly wasn't, because it wasn't, all I heard was $50,000 or $60,000. That's all I heard, so.
Is there, I guess, a consensus to direct staff to investigate an option for that air exchanger? I guess that's what we would need this evening.
I agree with it.
I agree.
Not direction to pull the trigger on anything, but direction to bring back some options. Okay. Councillor McDougall, I know you had your hand up there quite a while ago. I don't know if that was just to tell everybody your popcorn was done, or if you had.
Popcorn is done. No, hopefully this item is done because we've been talking about it for an hour. But no, Barb had just basically covered what I was going to say. So we're good.
Okay.
And they don't run that long. I had one down at the plant. We started it every Monday, and yeah, they're on for a bit, but they're not. But the other question too, Greg, is where would the one in St. Elmo's be situated? At the north end, northwest end, or?
Currently, it's in the back location by the back entrance into what I'll call the kitchen area there.
Yes, yeah, right.
On the other side of that, it's a little bit from the building, but it's basically just by the community rink there, I guess, or community gardens in that back area.
Yes. Okay, I know. Okay, thank you.
So I'm curious, could we take the enclosure from the St. Elmo's Fire Hall and put it at the Isles building?
You can have it. I don't think it runs.
It would solve a problem of complaints, and if we find out that people in the St. Elmo's area don't like the.
Don't give the guys from St. Elmo's anything.
No, well, I'm being serious. If we want to look at, because there are people living with that issue right now and have the generator. Bruce, with all due respect, I said we should put it in St. Elmo's as well. I think it's the proper thing to do. But if we think it might not be an issue for people in that area, I'm telling you, the residents that are right beside the Isles building would love to have an enclosure and lessen the sound. That's my point, I guess.
It's not technically feasible to do that.
Okay.
Between the units.
Councillor Duran, could we seek direction from council on the acquisition of the closure for the generator? I know we've had some discussion about it. We just need direction from council.
Oh, do you want us to raise our hand?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For both the enclosure and the.
To check it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, we're good.
Oh, Greg Campbell has 2 votes. He just put up. So that's everything for tech services. If there's nothing else, we'll throw it back over to Mayor Stewart.
Thank you, Councillor Drawn, for your great work on that one. And now, Councillor Brian McFeely, you've got an economic development report or comments and a couple of items. The floor is yours, Councillor McFeely.
I do, Your Worship, Economic Development Committee. We'll call that meeting to order. We have two things on the agenda. First one is just not just, but a report on the work of the COVID-19 task force that was initiated. And then the second piece, which I'll probably turn over to co-chair Justin to lead, is on the transit file. So the COVID-19 task force and Councillor Durand and Director Mike Tuska are online as well, so I'd ask them to jump in on this. And it's really, tonight is really just to give council a report on the work of the task force to date. And I really want to start by suggesting that although we're giving the report, it's really been a collaborative venture with the Chamber of Commerce and Downtown Summerside Inc. So I really want to thank those folks for their involvement in this and in many ways their leadership in this. So we appreciate that. This is the genesis of this is really around Mike in discussion with both of those organizations and how we could support local business in recovery from the COVID-19 tragedy from an economy perspective. It's really new territory for us all, so we're trying to kind of maneuver through that and understand what the implications are and what the impacts have been. But we do know that small business is a significant driver of the economy in our community, and we know that some of our small businesses are struggling big time, and some may not even come out of the other end of this. So. So our work has really been around looking at recovery, how we can help these business recover and look at some action-oriented kinds of things that we can do. So the group has met on a couple of occasions, and again, the sole purpose of the work of this group is to help mitigate the impact that COVID-19 has had in our city's business community and our workforce, and to complement, not replicate, the efforts of the provincial and federal partners. They have programs in place for small business, and our businesses are able, some businesses are able to take advantage of that, others maybe not. But those programs by no means are 100% of the answer for businesses to move forward. So we are really focused on ensuring that our post-COVID recovery efforts are coordinated and aligned so that we can maximize the necessary support that our community deserves. The group has had no shortage of ideas or initiatives to investigate, both generated by the group and things that we've heard from the community at large. We've had members of the community at large volunteer to be a part of the solution, the part of the exercise. We haven't figured out where volunteers are quite needed yet in the solution, but we're working through that. We realize, and again, all the people involved in this continue to work every day, hard every day, and that trying to kind of focus our efforts on ensuring that there's a good environment for the business community to recovery. So we've explored many different initiatives over the course of the past few weeks. Some have been discharged for a number of reasons, but we have focused in on our collective efforts on a couple of specific actions we will be launching publicly in the coming weeks. Specifically, we're looking at a new collaborative web, for lack of a that's kind of the technical term on it, but it's a virtual mall is what it is. We will be launching a new shared web portal highlighting all the great businesses in Summerside that are providing products and services to our residents. The web property will provide information on local businesses, their operations as they transition from post-lockdown, as well as exploring e-commerce linkages to support business sales and services. We have a number of businesses that haven't had a virtual presence and don't have the capacity to do the e-commerce, so working with them to enable them to do that. And we really, although the impetus is around the COVID piece, we want whatever we do to be sustainable in the long term, so it becomes part of the business community as we move forward. We will be using and growing the Forward Summerside banner as the brand of this thing. And that has some recognition already in the community. And it is something that the organizations have already collaborated on, so it made sense to use that platform. If people want to get a sense of what this thing looks like, it's kind of a takeoff of the one that they're doing in Ottawa, which I think came from Oklahoma. And you can just do a Google search on Together Apart, and you'll get a look at the Ottawa website and the types of things that it does. The second initiative that we're exploring is online seminars and education for our small businesses in the community. I know the Chamber has done a couple of those already, and perhaps growing on that and providing some education to our business community and on how they can navigate through this post-COVID time to make them stronger, to build their capacity, to ensure that they come out the other end on this thing. So I really want to personally thank Pam Skirman Montgomery and Tara Maddox of the Chamber, and Kenny Driscoll and Lydia Potter for being not only a part of this thing, but really kind of taking the leadership in moving this thing forward. Now with Lydia's departure, obviously Angie will be taking over there. So with that, those are the two initiatives we're going to focus on initially. There may be others, but it's really around helping our business community, which is significantly impacted by COVID, to come out the other end of this thing. Certainly, we'll probably never be able to get out the other end without some scars, but as minimal scars as possible. So I would ask Justin or Mike if you have anything to add to that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Justin.
Just if anyone's kind of looking to get a feel for what we're going after for this online project. I know you mentioned it, but the actual website is together-apart.ca. And it's great. You go on there and you can see who's open, when they're open, who's offering services like delivery and pickup, and all kind of consolidated into one spot. And it's really helpful, especially with what we're going through now, and it'll be useful even beyond now as people are looking for information on different businesses. So it's really neat. Together-apart.ca. And it's Ottawa.
Thanks, Justin. And I would just add, it's really around encouraging people to shop locally.
Oh, of course.
And maybe get a few less UPS trucks around town.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a pile of them.
Yeah.
Mike Tatuska, anything to add?
No, I think Brian, you covered it all. The template for the website is done. It just needs approval of the committee, and we hope to launch it in the next 4 to 5 days. So great work by a great bunch of people.
So is it www.together-apart? Is that what you said, Justin? Sorry.
That's the sample. That's the one that's currently running out of Ottawa. It's just a template for what we're going after here.
Okay. All right. But
Councillor Ramsey, we'll be using the Forward Summerside brand and kind of resurrecting that because it was initially developed as a root model. So that's what we're going to try and do.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council?
Sounds good.
So we just wanted to give an update in the report to council on that tonight, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of sense of the efforts over the last couple of weeks to try to bring some of this stuff together, really around supporting our business community in Summerside. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the second item on the Economic Development Committee report, and that's an update report on the efforts around transit. And I know Councillor Duran, Councillor Snow, and CAO, and maybe others that have been involved in exploring some of that items around transit. So I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Duran to perhaps take the lead on this particular item.
Sure, thanks, Councillor McFeely. We did, Councillor Snow and I and CAO Rob meet, I guess a couple times over the last couple months. We had been contacted by Aaron Wedge over at Wedge Tours just about sort of proposal that he had and what he may be able to offer to us in terms of a transit for the city. The whole COVID-19 kind of put a wrench in things. We weren't able to get off the ground quite as quickly as we may have hoped, but that being said, we did do what we could, and I believe there was some there was some direction to explore the possibility of getting a consultation done on the needs of our city as far as transit goes, and I believe CAO Rob has a bit of an update as to what such a thing may of course cost, and nothing can be done obviously without the support of council, but I think Aaron had a really good realistic outlook, and I think the idea was to have a consultation done to back that up, and I will pass it over to CAO Rob or Councillor Snow if you have anything to add to that.
Just to add, yeah, just quickly, although we did receive, Aaron reached out to us to just see what we were doing with our transit. I guess it's important to note that we do have currently a transit operator within the city. Now, I made it clear previously when this was brought up that I didn't think we were, I really felt our transit system is lacking. So to be able to say that we have a transit, I think we need to make decisions either to enhance it or scrap it altogether, because I don't think the current transit system is working. It's not very well known. There's lots of issues that are mentioned to me with it. So I guess that's it. We had a local operator in the tourism or tour bus industry reach out to see if there was some interest in the city to look further, but we do currently have somebody that is operating. So any and everybody's willing to come forward, I guess, if we got to that point, but I guess that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, okay. And I should throw out there too that we're not looking to study what Aaron's company can do for us. It's a study of what we as a city need in terms of transit, and whether that is something that we ask Mr. Wedge to do, or whether that's something T3 can offer. It's not about switching providers, just about identifying we can enhance and improve upon. Just the fact that it was kind of started with their conversations with Aaron. So Councillor Ramsey?
Yeah, I just want to say that in all due respect to the transit that we did have here in Summerside up until COVID, and I'm not sure where that is now, that it was very well received by a lot of seniors in Summerside. A lot of ladies that I knew used that transit system. And he was very kind to them and would do extra stops for them. And, just so we know that that was in place, and that was very well received by a lot of our seniors and people who needed to get from uptown to downtown. And he would even drive them to their door. So I just want to give him credit where credit's due. So anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think there's really, we're not receiving complaints about our current situation. It's just
Okay.
a lot of people are,
Because I didn't hear any, so I just wanted
no,
to.
we're just really looking to, we've been talking about transit for so long and clearly there's a lot of room for improvement, whether that's on the city's end or the provider's end. It has nothing to do with, you know, what company's doing what. So it's
Right.
sure.
Okay, I just wanted to make put that out there for that man that did do such great work here. Yeah. Okay.
And they're still, I believe through all this, everything's still running. I believe. I know I've seen them around. So CAO Rob, I guess I'll turn it over.
Deputy Mayor had a comment there, I think, too, before.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McFeely. I think with the transit, some of the comments that I have heard is people are very interested in it, but for anybody who is dependent on it for working schedules, for example, if they don't work the usual 8:30 to 4:30, but for them, they're looking for some consistency in pickup locations and possibly some coverings where if they're waiting for a bus and it's raining or really, you know, bad weather, there's shelter for them while they're waiting for that schedule, and for the schedules to be known a little bit better. And I think that would increase our ridership, but I've heard that from people that are seniors, people who don't have vehicles, and also people who work at the tax center. They are, you know, maybe one vehicle, and the person that is working would certainly use the bus ridership a lot more if the schedules were a bit more frequent and they knew the stops.
Agreed, for sure. You had something, or you were just kind of pointing out the fact that Deputy Mayor had a point?
Just pointing out the fact and leave it with you to.
Great, teamwork. Okay, CAO Rob, did you want to speak to the possibility of, you know, studies or whatever we have there?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to bring council up to date, just to build on the points raised by Councillors Duran and Snow, that we have, there's been an internal committee that's been having some discussions with a local provider about the possibility of partnering on a transit service. But I think it really goes back to the fact that we've had the current transit service in operation now for about, this is 2020, so almost 8 years. And we felt as an organization, it was a really good time to be able to sit back and take stock of our service and to see, maybe have someone come in with a fresh set of eyes and to look at our current service, look at the demographics of our community, both current and what the demographics will look like in the future, and to provide some recommendations on what a proper transit service or an appropriate size transit service for a community of 15,000 people. And we felt that in order to move forward on that, we would need council direction to explore having an RFP issued and have a consultant come in and do that work. We've done an environmental scan of qualified consultants across the country to undertake a project or an assessment something like this. You're looking at somewhere in the range of about 30 to 50,000 to get the assessment done. And so I guess the purpose of bringing this forward to you tonight is to seek council direction on whether there is interest on issuing an RFP to have a consultant come in and do a review of our transit service. The other partners in our transit service, i.e. T3 and Slemon Park Corporation, who also would be a key partner in this service. They are aware of our interest in moving forward with an RFP, but at the same time, we need to seek that direction from council as to whether you feel it would be worthwhile to do so. And if we were to proceed with it and award an RFP, would be an unbudgeted expenditure, but if council is supportive of it, we will identify the funds for the review somewhere.
Councillor McDougall, does the thumbs up mean you're in support or that you want to talk?
No, I want to talk. Just a question, Rob. I support the RFP. The question around funds to operate a viable transit and what is available through federal monies, provincial monies, or whatever, would that be part of that RFP?
We've had some preliminary discussions with the province, Councillor McDougall, on infrastructure funding, and it's our understanding right now that the funding that's being offered through the Government of Canada would be for new systems, new transit systems. It would not be for expansion of existing systems. Having said that, we've been advised by the province that they are in discussions with the Government of Canada to revisit that criteria, because there are other municipalities in addition to Summerside that are looking to possibly expand their services. So not saying it will happen right away, but those discussions are certainly ongoing.
Right. Now, the Federation has asked them to look at that. And I know FCM, the Atlantic Caucus, has asked them to revisit that, because all the transit money goes to the larger municipalities. And, you know, it's not for operational. It's basically, so if there was any dollars there that we were able to get, you know, because I think it's a service that's needed, but it's a costly service.
For sure. Thank you.
Councillor Ramsey?
I guess I just have a question regarding the study. There's got to be another municipality with 15,000 people that have had this study done. Like, do we have to have another study, or can we find out from another municipality if they've had the study done, or, you know what I mean? Like, without spending all this money on a study, we know we need it, but like, as far as what that looks like, and that's just a question I have. And you said like not like that it's an expansion. So that gentleman that's given us the last 7 years working, you know, what happens to him? You know, I guess that's another question that I would have, like, where does his job end up in all this? So I think there's a few things that we may be able to look at or consider.
I guess, Councillor Ramsey, just to respond to that, I mean, the current provider certainly would be a full partner and be very involved in whatever review process we decide to undertake as an organization and as a community. Again, very early days. To go to your point or question about like other similar sized municipalities, we've done a preliminary background review on some of the municipalities that have had these types of reviews done. Some of these municipalities, I mean, they've run into issues around differences around demographics and things like that. Not saying that that would necessarily be unique to Summerside per se. I guess we're just looking at it for someone to come in who has had some experience in making recommendations on these types of systems, and maybe to come in and give us a very general, very stripped down type of analysis, so that at least we have some data to make some decisions on. Because I think that's one of the challenges that we've run into in the past, is that we really haven't had very good data to rely upon to be able to make recommendations to you and the rest of council on the effectiveness of our service.
Right. And that cost, sorry, Rob, that cost is like between 40 and 50,000 or 30 and 40,000. Is that
For the study, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ballpark figure just based on what we've heard from other municipalities to get the type of review and the type of report that we'd be looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
sorry?
I just want, where does it stand then with regards to the study and the report?
I guess we'll need a council consensus to say whether we want to direct staff to proceed with such a study. Is that something that we can do
That's
tonight?
not budgeted, right? Like we don't have that in the budget anywhere, right?
Yeah, so I think what we would need tonight from council is if you are in support of at least issuing an RFP, we can go ahead and do that. We would then have to bring back a recommendation when we're awarding the RFP. And if it turns out for whatever reason that council does not want to issue it because it's deemed to be too costly or what have you, then you can certainly make that decision at that time.
Okay.
But to
I
follow
think,
up on Councillor Ramsey's comment, it's not in the budget.
Yeah, I would suggest, Rob, any recommendation that would come back would indicate how you would propose it be paid for.
That's
Right.
correct. Mhm.
So we're up for a recommendation, right? I'm good with that.
So we really, there's no risk in the RFP. I mean, we do the RFP, we find out what our costs are, and then we determine whether we have the resources to move forward.
Right.
We'll take a consensus tonight then to move forward with the RFP and take it from there after that gets back to us.
Yep.
Great.
Right. Anybody opposed? No, so we'll wait for the details on that and talk about it when the time comes.
So that concludes, Your Worship, the two items on the Economic Development Committee for this evening, sir.
Thank you, Councillor McFeely, for your great work on that. And I believe the next one, I understand item number B is removed from the agenda for now. But item number 5 on the agenda is the Community Services. Councillor Snow is the chair. And I turn it over to you, Councillor Snow. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to start, I guess, by, I know A is there waiting to be talked about, but I just want to start by congratulating our Junior A coach here in Summerside, Billy McGuigan. He was just recently announced as the Canadian Junior A Hockey League Coach of the Year. It's an absolute amazing accomplishment. There's 150 some teams across Canada, and to be named Coach of the Year is a huge accomplishment. So I just want to acknowledge that, and then on top of that, acknowledge all the Summerside residents, fans, and neighboring fans probably as well that took part in a drive-by celebration. Being COVID, we can't really hold a celebration to recognize Billy at this point, but there was a long drive past his house and horns honking, and Bill, you could tell Billy really enjoyed that, and it was great to see, and just congratulations to Billy and all the team staff that worked together to achieve this. So I don't know, Carrie, I just seen your hand pop up there. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Well, of course, congratulations to Billy on that. Another, while we're on the topic of community services, and also falls under our sports in the city, I just wanted to send out healing wishes to Blair Creelman. Creeley is currently in St. John. He had a heart attack late last week, and different people have been messaging, wondering if we've heard anything through baseball and so on. Tracy is with him and has been keeping everybody updated. He had a rough weekend, but he's coming along quite well the past day or so. Anybody that's on Facebook, if you want to go, you can search a little group they have. It's called Healing Wishes for Blair Creelman, and you can join that group and you can send some messages, and Tracy's getting them, and then I'm sure that when he's in recovery, he'll love to see some of the stories and comments that people are posting. So everything he's done for the kids and the citizens, not only in Summerside, but you know, he works at Lennox Island, and I know he's treasured up there. So we definitely all our best to Blair and to Tracy right now to get back to us quickly.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, Blair is he's a great guy. He's done a lot around our community, and specifically in the ball and with the neighboring communities with youth, and yeah, it's been great to see the support for Blair during this difficult time and his family, and hopefully he continues to improve.
Great, Councillor Snow. I certainly agree with you, and the congratulations to Billy McGuigan, the coach. And it was a shame the way the season ended. He would have gone on, and everybody feels that he could have won the Canadian Championship. He had the team for it, and it was a shame that it didn't happen because of the COVID situation, the playoffs and everything ended. But that's a great honor to have a Summerside resident given the award of Coach of the Year. Congratulations to Billy.
Exactly. So first up, and the only thing we have here on the community services agenda tonight is the Gateway signage update. We have JP DeRoger with us here tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to him to give us an update on our Gateway signage.
Thank you, Councillor Snow. Going to be a pretty quick update. Essentially, following the approval of our budget this year in capital, we proceeded to have a tender drafted for the Gateway signage as budgeted and as discussed for what I'll call the Gateway to Summerside just off of Red Bridge. That tender was issued just over a week ago. It's set to close on May 15th. Following that time, as long as everything goes well in terms of pricing, we'll have a tender recommendation coming to Community Services Committee for review and approval. Thus far, we've had a number of firms asking questions about the proposal, which is good. So that's indications that we'll see some bids and more to talk about, I suppose, once the tender closes on the 15th. So I think at that point, that's pretty much all I have so far in terms of an update on the project. We'll get into the more of the meat and potatoes once the tenders close.
Okay, thank you, JP. I think it's important to note that there's been other locations other than the Red Bridge identified for possible future signage with the entry points to the city of Summerside. So this is hopefully just a start of some other work being done to enhance our signage coming into our city. But it'll be great to get this started, and it'll be a great project to have completed. Just wondering if there's any other questions from councillors regarding this topic.
I have a comment. You mentioned about the gateway signage into different entry points to the city, but also I believe Director JP had mentioned that in the downtown core, that would also be an important point since we are really trying to rejuvenate the downtown. So I don't know when that's going to come, but I'll be advocating very hard for it too. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Councilor Coleman. That, yeah, I think if council recalls the initial project that came ahead had number of locations, and you're right, downtown was one of the locations that had some signage options for council to consider. During this year's budget, what we got through the budget only allowed for that one location to start with. But I agree with you, enhancement in the downtown is something we need to really start looking at as well, and as well as the other locations in our city. So I look forward to it as well, Councilor Coleman, that we move ahead on the project. And if there's no other questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Your Worship, for the next agenda item.
Thank you, Councillor Snow, for your great work as well. Okay, we're moving right along here. I understand, I believe Councillor Adams, you're next with the Policy Review Committee.
That is actually the eviction notices and short-term rentals. That's actually put on the agenda by Councillor McFeely, so he's going to take this one.
Go ahead, Councillor McFeely. Floor is yours.
On mute here.
Where is he? Oh, there he is.
Huh?
Can't see you, Brian.
Yeah.
There he is.
I'm ready to look at when there's no picture there.
Yeah, you were out having a sandwich, were you?
Yeah. No, it's time to deal with another issue. Anyways, I raised this because I think I had circulated back right at the start of this COVID issue that I had gotten a note from a resident that had been given an eviction notice because the owner of the apartment was turning them into short-term rentals. I'd never really kind of had an envision or a vision that we had a big issue in Summerside around short-term rentals as it impacts our affordable housing situation. But I've come to understand that that's not the first time that that's happened, that people are receiving eviction notice because the landowner wanted to turn it into a short-term rental. I don't know if it's a prevalent issue. I don't think we need to have a big debate on it other than to raise it, maybe ask staff if they can kind of do an environmental scan so that we get a handle on whether it is an issue or not. Perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it is. And if it's impacting our affordable housing situation, then it's something that we may want to take a look at. So I think I had asked at that time that we place it on the future agenda. It was placed on the agenda tonight. And simply for that purpose to kind of get it into into a discussion mode, but I don't think we have the adequate information to have a good discussion until we sort of do an environmental scan, have an understanding how prevalent the problem is. So, Rob, I don't know, you and I have talked about this a bit. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. Nothing further to add, Councillor McFeely, other than if council wishes us to explore this particular topic, particularly around the short-term rentals piece, we'd be pleased to do so and bring back our research to council for further discussion.
If I could just chime in for 2 seconds. Earlier on, there was some discussion in Charlottetown regarding short-term rentals and the correlation between those and the hotel levy. And if those should be brought forward as part of our levy committee discussions as well. So some preliminary work was done between myself and Tourism Summerside on the volume of short-term rentals that exist through Airbnb and others in the city. So there is already sort of a start to that work. So it's probably a good time for us to kind of revisit that and dust it off and get it back to council as well. And I think from a levy discussion perspective, Rob, you probably would agree, might as well get looked at a little more deeply as well.
Yeah. And that's a whole other discussion as well, JP, and I agree. If it's determined that it is prevalent, then perhaps they should be subjected to that levy as well. So I think that's part of the discussion as well.
A short-term scan would indicate that there's more short-term rentals in Summerside than one would think. We are a tourism destination, not unlike many others, including Charlottetown, and I think sometimes we get underestimated in our visitation, but I think from an Airbnb perspective, there's more here in our community than I think one would consider. So it's worth looking at and getting a little more detail on.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, my motivation is around if people are getting eviction notices and it's impacting our inventory of affordable housing options, then we should be looking at it. So
Probably not going to be an option in the summer.
Go ahead, Bruce.
I say it's probably not going to be a problem this summer because of there's a big
Nobody coming.
nobody.
No, it's not an issue. It's not an acute issue, but could be down the road again. So
Yes, so I'm looking.
Okay, is that all you have on that one, Councillor McFeely?
that's it, sir.
Okay, just before we move on there, I believe last night, our PEI Federation of Municipalities, and maybe Bruce or Councillor McDougall may want to comment on it. And I sat in on the meeting with Dr. Morrison, and our CAO, Rob Philpott, sat in on it. And Bruce or Rob, you just want to update council briefly on the meeting, what Dr. Morrison had to say in regards to a sort of an ease back for our city and other municipalities?
I'll let Rob speak there, but we
right,
through
Rob.
the Federation, we set up a meeting with all the municipalities that wanted to join in. And I was glad to see our CAO join in there as well as the mayor. We had 53 or 55 participants. And what we did is we asked everybody to submit the questions, and we forwarded the questions to Dr. Morrison and her staff a couple of days ago. And last night she came on. She was only supposed to be there for 45 minutes, and I think we had her for about an hour and a half. And She went through all the questions, and yeah, it was a great session, and maybe I'll let Rob basically take it from there on how it basically.
Thank you, Councillor McDougall.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McDougall and your worship. Yeah, I think it was a very productive meeting or video call last night with the Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Morrison. Many of the municipalities who participated in the call last night had a lot of questions around, limitations around the number of people that were allowed in particular meeting spaces at any one time. What are some of the restrictions around playgrounds and other outdoor facilities that are owned and operated by municipalities? I think generally speaking, if I could say from the city's perspective, and we've made Mayor and Council aware of some planned reopenings that we have within our Community Services Department, and what we're planning to do for reopening of services to the public here at City Hall. I can say that so far some of the preliminary planning that we have done certainly seems to line up with the guidance that's been offered by the province through the Chief Public Health Officer. The one area of, I guess, clarification that came up in the discussion last night, and I passed this on to our Community Services Director, is that we were originally looking at in phase 2, which is, I believe, May 22nd. We were hoping, again, just very tentatively, hoping to have playgrounds open at that time, but Dr. Morrison and her team recommended to all municipalities that maybe all municipalities may want to wait until phase 3, which is June 12th, before considering opening playgrounds to the general public. But by and large, it seems that our planning seems to line up quite well with the guidelines offered by the public health authorities. They've also provided a template that we can use as a municipality to ensure that the departments are almost like a checklist type of approach to ensure that we're covering all the bases in terms of our planning to ramp up back to full operations. And of course, the province is always there, that if we have any questions or are unsure about how to proceed in a certain area or with a certain practice, that they will certainly provide that guidance where possible. So all in all, it seemed like, I'll certainly say from my perspective, it was a very positive discussion, and good that the Chief Public Health Officer was willing to engage so openly with all municipalities.
And Rob, one other point there, I believe, and you might have touched base on it, but the 15 people per, I think that's after June.
Yes, June 12th, yeah, phase 3.
You're allowed to have 15 people per floor.
Yeah.
At City Hall, so.
Yeah, at any one time, yeah.
So, thanks.
Okay, looks like we've gotten to, I see there's a couple items for the committee of the whole.
I just
But
have,
before there's some questions, I believe Councillor Adams, you had a comment?
I just had one thing, just wanted to, before I welcome her, I'd like to thank Lydia Potter for all her work with Downtown Summerside. Lydia is no longer with Downtown Summerside, but the work and the ideas that she had were very much appreciated by council and residents and the downtown merchants. And also just wanted to say welcome to Interim Executive Director Angie Arsenault. I know Angie will be great to work with as well, and I'm sure she'll be reaching out to JP and Greg and see what can be done, so they can all work together to make things work well downtown. So anyways, I wasn't sure if anybody else had mentioned it, so just wanted to get that in before we were done.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other comments from any councillors before we adjourn? We've got a few items for the committee of the whole. If there are no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
So moved by Bruce and seconded by Councillor Ramsey. And a whole bunch of people can second it. Anyway, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all, and good evening, everyone, and the meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Right.
Night, chief.